So today what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of warm-up before we do our real lesson. So if you want to go ahead in this lesson and just skip this, just fast forward and then start the lesson, but come back. But make sure you come back and take a look at this at some point. So when you are factoring, what you have to do is you need to realize that you must common factor first. Now, for the first problem, you don't have to common factor because there is no number sitting in front of here that is divisible into each of these numbers in this problem. So now what we need to do is we need to do the following. So what we need to do right now is we need to figure out two numbers that times to something and adds to something, and that times to negative 24, but then adds to negative 5. Now, two numbers that multiply to negative 24 are 8 and 3, but by going through the math, you'll find out you got to use negative 8 plus 3 to give us our negative 5. So we've got what we're looking for. So now that we have our factorization, we can write the following. Equals y, and y again, and then we're going to put minus 8 and plus 3 in our brackets. So now the next problem that we have here is this one. Now, sometimes with a number 2 sitting in front, we want to check to see if all of the numbers in this thing are divisible by 2. And if it is divisible by 2, we are going to common factor this whole thing to reduce our problem a little bit. So in this case, 2 divides everything. So let's pull out a 2. So we end up with 2, and then we have x squared, and then 6 divided by 2 is positive 3x, and then minus 54. So now our problem ends up turning into something like this, x squared plus 3x minus 54. And what we're looking for is a number that timeses to negative 54, but then adds to positive 3. Now, what you'll notice that when you do the calculations, you're going to get the following. You're going to find out that 9 and 6, so 9 times 6 gives us 54, but 9 times negative 6 gives us also negative 54, but if we go 9 minus 6, we end up with our positive 3, which is what we're looking for. So now our factorization becomes 2x and x again, and we have plus 9 and minus 6 as our factorization. So now let's move on to the last problem of the day. Now this one is what happens when we have 12x squared plus 28x. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for the GCF of the two things. So the key is to look for two things that divide both the 12 and the 28 and the x squared and the x. So the thing that divides both the 24, the 12, and the 28 is 4x. Now the reason why it divides the common factor is 4x is because the GCF of 12x squared and 28x is 4x. So now that we've done that, we're literally just going to take our time and we're going to literally divide out x into everything that's above that red line there. So now we're left with, well, 12 divided by 4 is 3. and then x squared divided by x gives us x left over. And then we're going to take a look at the 28x. And positive 28x divided by 4 is going to be positive 7. And x divided by x is nothing. And we are done. Now let's move on to the lesson of the day. So now, what are we doing today? We're literally factoring equations that look like this. 2x squared plus 6x plus 4. You'll notice that at the front and the back, we have a number that's on the x squared term and a number at the end, and we're going to be focusing on that. Now, how do we know we understand what the heck is going on? Well, you wouldn't believe it, but you're going to be using exactly the same rules as before, but just a slight change. And you're going to realize that you're going to be using common factoring like a boss by the end of this. It might take us 2 or 3 days, but you guys are going to get it because you guys have matured and you're ready to work and you've got a goal to go. You've got a goal, and that's what you're here for. So now let's talk about factoring difficult trinomials. Okay? The key concept of a difficult trinomial is the fact that we have a trinomial where the coefficient of the squared term, where we have our a value, is not equal to 1 and is not a common factor of everything in this equation. Now, in this case, 2 parts will be determined by finding the 2 numbers that multiply the product of the a term and the c term, but then must add to the b term. And we're literally just finding 2 numbers for which this happens. So in essence, we're looking for exactly the same middle from before, but this times we have to times by a and c. So we have to find the a times the c for our timesing, but we're using the same middle that we used before. Now let's go over our examples, and what we're going to do is we're going to take our time and zoom in on this one example where we are factoring the following equations. So here's what we got to focus on. We got to focus on this 2. When we look at this 2, you'll notice that for the 2, it doesn't divide into the 7 or the 3. So what we have to do is we have to consider the front and the back of this problem. So essentially, we are looking for the timesing of this, but then we're going to use the addition for the center. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to come up with 2 numbers that add to the middle number, which is positive 7, but then times to 2 times 3, which is 6. Now that I've done that, we just have to find some examples. So now 2 numbers that multiply to 6. So I'm going to start with 1 and 6. So 1 times 6 is 6. Yeah, we're good. But 1 plus 6 gives us 7. So here's what we do for our calculation. We're going to take 2x squared. We're going to rewrite this as equal to 2x squared. And we're going to put plus 6x plus the 1x that we had from before. And then plus 3. And all we've done is used those two numbers to take the middle term, the 7, and split it into 6 and 1. Now, in doing so, this allows us to do this. We take the equation and we split it into two brackets with a plus in between. Now, the first bracket is going to contain just this stuff here. And the second bracket is going to contain all of this stuff here. And we end up with the following. 2x squared plus 6x is going to be in the blue bracket, which is the front half of our equation, plus the last half. Now the last half is just going to be 1x plus 3. And now for each bracket, we need to use the GCF. So we got to look at the first bracket. Well, 2 divides the 2 and the 6, and then the lowest value of x between them is x. So our GCF for this first half is going to be 2x, and then we divide it out. We divide those out. We divide the 2x into that bracket, and we end up with, well, x plus 3. And now we still have our plus, and we have our second bracket, right? Now our second bracket, the only thing that divides the 1x and the 3 is just a 1, isn't it? So let's pull that out. And then we're left with, well, 1 divided by 1 is just, we don't need to write it. Then we just have x plus 3 again. Now, you'll notice that the moment that I have 1, x plus 3, this basically tells me, the moment I have the same brackets here, this tells me I know I'm right. Big check mark. So what this forces me to do is I can go and take the common factor of each of these blocks of multiplication, and it turns out the common factor for these blocks of multiplication is just x plus 3. And then in the second bracket, all we're going to do is we're going to put down whatever's left over from the previous line. So we end up with 2x and plus 1 as our final factored bracket. So now let's go through some more problems and we'll see if we make sense of it. So now let's take a look at this one. We have 2x squared minus 3x minus 35. So what we're looking for is two numbers, just like the before, that add to -3, but then times to the front and the back, which we wrote like this in class. So we kind of said we times to 2 times 35, which is, I guess this is -70. And we go through the math for it. So we got to figure out two numbers that multiply to 70. You know what? First one off the top of my head is 10 and 7. Now, 10 times 7 is 70, right? But it's not -70. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try -7 and 10, and when I add them together, does it give me -3? It doesn't necessarily give me -3, but it gives us +3. So that means that all I have to do is transfer that negative sign that I had here, and put it on the -10. So -10 plus 7 does give us what we need. So now all we have to do is we're going to go through the motions like before. We're going to write, well, that's equal to 2x squared, and then we're going to put minus 10x plus 7x, and then minus 35. And remember that all we're really doing is splitting the middle term once we have found those two numbers. Okay, so now that we've done that, remember the first half is going to be this. The first half is going to be split into this, and then the second half basically takes everything from here over. Okay, so now we're going to rewrite our calculations as a bracketed result. Okay, so my first bracket, which is in blue, is going to have 2x squared minus 10x. Okay, and then we're going to have a plus, always a plus, the second bracket. And the second bracket is going to be 7x, positive 7x minus 35. So now for the first bracket, what we need to do is we need to find two numbers that divide, a number that divides this whole thing. Well, usually a number, and it's for these ones, it's always a number and a letter. So in this case, I'm going to pull off a 2x, and we're left with x minus 5 as our factored form. Now, when we do our second half, we must end up with x minus 5 for the second half. So we're going to go plus, we're going to bracket our second half. Okay, and now what are we pulling off from this bracket? The only thing that divides out of both of these terms in here is the number 7. So we're going to pull out a 7, and we're left with x minus 5 again. So guess what? Yes, we're on the right track. Woohoo, good stuff. So now all we have is this and this the same. So we're going to pull that out as our factorization. So we got x minus 5, and then we put in the second bracket 2x plus 7. All that's left over, and there is our final answer. All right, so here is our third example. Okay, for our third example, this one is going to be pretty easy. So I'm just going to run through it real quick with you. So the key is, for this one, you'll notice we have 3 that doesn't divide into anything. But you'll notice that we're going to be looking for two numbers that are timesing to whatever 3 times 3 is, which is positive 9, but then adds to the middle term. And the middle term is negative 10. So you go through all your calculations, and you'll notice that if I have negative 9 and negative 1, because negative 9 and negative 1, when you add it together, gives you negative 10, but negative 1 times negative 9 gives us positive 9, which is what we're looking for. So now we'll go and split the terms in the middle. But now that we've done that, we have to fulfill our first half and our second half brackets that we did from before. So now we end up with this. We have exactly the same thing that we had for our first two problems, where we just put the first half of the equation into the bracket. But for the second half, before we used to have a positive sign here, right? And by putting in the positive sign, nothing really changed. But now we have this minus sign. We need to put it in the bracket. We need to put exactly half of the equation into our bracket. So we have negative x, and we have plus 3. Now, from the first bracket, let's go and do our GCF. The GCF of 3x squared and 9x is just 3x, which leaves us in our brackets x minus 3. And that's because we take 3 divided by 3 gives us 1, which is nothing. nothing on the x. And then x squared divided by x leaves us 1x over. And then we do 9x divided by 3x gives us just minus 3. So now let's go and do the second half. So we end up with minus. I'm going to tell you why it's minus, because if you think of what's in front of this negative x, it really means negative 1x. And in order to get it to look like, get our second bracket to look identical, we have to divide out the negative number that is sitting on front of the bracket. And that will force our, well, we can see that our GCF is 1, but in order to make it x minus 3, we literally have to pull out a minus 1. And then that leaves us with x minus 3. It just flips all the signs from negatives to positive and positive to negative. So we end up with matching brackets, which is what we are always looking for. So we got what we're looking for. So now we can factor. So in the blue brackets, we have x minus 3. And then in the garbage brackets at the end, we end up with, well, 3x minus 1 as our final answer. And we're done. So now let's work on this last problem of the day. So now we're going to use exactly the same things as before. We're going to look at the front and the back, and we're going to see if 8 and 18 and 5 can be divided by anything. No, we can't. So we got to go and take a look at a number that two numbers that times 2. Well, 8 times negative 5 is negative 40, but then adds to the middle term here of positive 18. So it's 18, right? Two numbers that when you times them together, it becomes negative 40, and then adds to positive 18. And I'm going to tell you right away that it's 20 and negative 2. Okay, 20 plus negative 2 gives us positive 18, and 20 times negative 2 gives us what we're looking for. So now, pause the video, do the rest, and then take a look at the final answer. And then I want you to go and do the work. And I'll show you the final solution. It's up to you to figure out what we did with this, and then I just want you to do the homework. Now, the trick to this overall problem is substituting appropriately. Now, you could start by putting plus 20a in here or minus 2 at the beginning. It's up to you, and the numbers will still come out. So now, let's go through this last one. So now we're left with, well, so for the first bracket, you'll notice that we have 4a as the GCF, and you end up with a bracket of 2a plus 5. Now, because of this minus sign that I have right here, what we're going to do is we're going to have to pull off a minus 1 because though we have negative 2a minus 5, we have to get that to match. And if you look at the negative 2, the rule is if there's a negative in the second bracket on the first term, we got to at least pull out a minus sign, minimum. A minus and whatever number. And the only GCF in here is 1, so we're going to pull off minus 1, and we're left with 2a plus 5. And now we have our two matching brackets, so we know we're good. So now we can go and pull that off to get 2a plus 5. And in the second bracket, we're going to get 4a minus 1 as our final answer, and we are done. So the homework is posted on the website. It should take us about a day to get this done. All right. Good luck, guys.